dense fog rolls off the Atlantic Ocean and engulfs the rocky coastline of Newport, Rhode Island, with a suffocating embrace. Amidst the sprawling mansions of the Gilded Age stands a structure that defies the conventional beauty of its neighbors. Belcourt Castle does not shimmer with the white marble innocence of the breakers or the marble house. Instead, it looms with a brooding intensity and a dark architectural ambition that seems to swallow the light around it. The air surrounding the estate feels heavier than the salt mist alone can explain. Visitors often report a sudden drop in temperature as they cross the threshold of the iron gates. It is a cold that seeps through heavy coats and settles deep within the marrow of the bone. This is a place where history refuses to remain in the past, and the spirits of the dead claim tenancy over the living. Construction of this imposing edifice began in the late 19th century under the direction of a man whose eccentricities were as vast as his fortune. Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont commissioned the legendary architect Richard Morris Hunt to design a bachelor pad that was less a home and more a shrine to his obsessions. Unlike the typical summer cottages of the Newport elite, which focused on ballrooms and ocean views, Belcourt was built around a massive stable. The ground floor was dedicated entirely to Belmont's beloved horses, with the living quarters squeezed above. The design was modeled after the hunting lodge of Louis XIII at Versailles, but twisted to suit the peculiar tastes of its master. From the very beginning, the house felt out of time and out of place, a jagged scar on the manicured landscape of high society. Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont was a man who lived life on his own terms, regardless of the whispers from the polite society of New York and Newport. He was a collector of the unusual and the macabre, and his travels took him to corners of the world where ancient mysticism still held sway. He filled the halls of Belcourt with artifacts that carried energies from centuries past, armor that had seen violent death on European battlefields, and statues of saints and sinners lined the corridors. He did not simply decorate a home, he curated a vessel for history. It is said that objects retain the emotional resonance of their previous owners, and Belmont imported thousands of these emotionally charged items into a single confined space. The resulting atmosphere was electric, with an unseen tension that visitors could feel but not explain. The ground floor stables were a marvel of engineering and luxury, but they also introduced a strange energy to the house. The horses lived better than most people of the era, sleeping on fine linen sheets and draped in blankets embroidered with the Belmont family crest. But animals are sensitive to the supernatural in ways that humans often ignore. Stable hands would frequently report the horses becoming agitated for no apparent reason, kicking at their stalls. and rolling their eyes in terror at empty corners. The sounds of restless hooves on the stone floors would echo up through the ventilation shafts into the living quarters, creating a cacophony that sounded like a distant stampede. Even after the horses were long gone, the phantom sounds of whinnying and the clatter of iron shoes continued to plague the castle. Upon the marriage of Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont to the formidable Alva Vanderbilt, the house underwent significant changes. Alva was a force of nature who demanded that the stables be moved so she could reclaim the ground floor for human use. She tried to scrub away the scent of the stables and the dark masculinity of the hunting lodge aesthetic. But the house seemed to resist her influence. Construction workers reported tools vanishing and reappearing in impossible places. Accidents were frequent and unexplained. It was as if the house itself had developed a consciousness and resented the alterations being made to its original form. Alva was not a woman to be trifled with, but even she admitted to feeling watched by unseen eyes when she walked the halls alone at night. The true darkness of Belcourt Castle began to manifest more clearly after the passing of Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont. The house changed hands and eventually fell into a state of disrepair that mirrored the crumbling fortunes of the Gilded Age elite. It became a hollow shell of its former glory, collecting dust and shadows in equal measure. In 1956, the Tinney family purchased the estate, saving it from demolition. They intended to restore the castle and live there as a family, but they soon realized they were not the only inhabitants. The Tinneys were a family of artists and musicians, and perhaps their creative sensibilities made them more attuned to the spectral frequencies of the house. From their very first night, they knew that Belcourt was alive. Tinney, the daughter of the new owners, became the primary chronicler of the hauntings that plagued the family for decades. She recalled that the atmosphere in the castle was not just spooky, but actively hostile at times. One of the most terrifying locations in the house is the Gothic ballroom. This vast room with its vaulted ceiling and enormous fireplace was designed to impress, but it serves only to intimidate. A choir loft overlooks the room, and it is from this vantage point that a dark figure is often seen watching the living below. This figure is believed to be the spirit of a monk, a remnant attached to a statue or artifact brought over from an Italian monastery. The monk does not walk, he glides, and his presence brings an overwhelming sense of despair. The entity known as the monk is one of the most frequently cited apparitions within the castle walls. He appears in brown robes, with a hood drawn low over a face that no one has ever clearly seen. Witnesses describe a feeling of intense judgment emanating from the figure. He usually appears near the massive fireplace or up in the gallery, standing perfectly still like a statue come to life. Those who have encountered him report that the air around him becomes freezing cold, and all sound in the room is sucked away, leaving a deafening silence. He is not a benevolent spirit. His presence feels possessive, as if he is guarding the room against intruders. Some speculate he is attached to the reproduction of a reliquary that stands nearby, guarding a sacred trust long forgotten. Perhaps the most famous and aggressive haunted objects in Belcourt Castle are the two Saltarelli chairs. These are not ordinary pieces of furniture, but antiques dating back to the Renaissance. They are high-backed carved chairs that look regal and inviting, but they harbor a dark secret. The Tinney family learned quickly that these chairs did not welcome anyone to sit in them. Visitors who attempted to sit in the chairs often reported a sensation of intense cold radiating from the wood. Others felt uncomfortable vibrations or a feeling of nausea that hit them the moment they made contact with the seat. But these were mild reactions compared to what would happen to those the spirits truly disliked. There are numerous documented accounts of people being physically ejected from the Saltarelli chairs. A skeptical tourist once sat down with a smirk, only to be thrown forward onto the floor by an invisible force. It was not a slip or a loss of balance, but a violent shove. On other occasions, people have felt hands gripping their shoulders or pushing against their chests, preventing them from sitting down at all. The energy surrounding these chairs is described as static and angry. It is as though the spirits of the original owners are still seated there, and they refuse to share their throne with the living. The chairs are now often roped off to prevent unsuspecting guests from inciting the wrath of the unseen occupants. The Grand Hall is another epicenter of paranormal activity within the castle. This massive space connects the various wings of the house and features a grand staircase that seems to act as a conduit for spiritual energy. At night, the sound of heavy footsteps can be heard ascending and descending the stairs when no one is there. The footsteps are slow and deliberate sounding, like heavy boots on wood. Tinney recounted hearing these steps many times, often accompanied by the rustling of fabric reminiscent of long Victorian skirts. It is a replay of the past, a residual haunting that loops the daily routines of the servants and masters who once walked these halls. But sometimes the footsteps stop outside a bedroom door and the handle begins to turn. The armor collection at Belcourt Castle is extensive and impressive, but it is also a source of great unease. Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont collected armor from all over Europe, and many of these suits had seen actual combat. They are dented and scarred, bearing the marks of violence. One particular suit of armor stands out for the horror associated with it. It is said that the knight who wore it died a screaming death, trapped inside the metal during a battle. Guests and residents have reported hearing blood-curdling screams echoing from the room where this armor is displayed. The screams are not human. They are the twisted metallic shrieks of a soul in agony. The visor of the helmet has been seen lifting on its own, revealing only darkness within. In the library, the hauntings take on a more intellectual, but no less disturbing character. Books have been known to fly off the shelves, as if thrown by an angry reader. The Tinney family would often organize the shelves, only to find them in disarray the next morning. It is not random chaos, but often specific books are pulled out and left open on tables. These books usually deal with history or the occult, suggesting that the spirits are trying to communicate or perhaps correct the historical record. The atmosphere in the library is often thick with the smell of old paper and pipe smoke, a scent associated with Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont himself. He seems to be a restless scholar, continuing his studies from beyond the grave. The sheer size of Belcourt Castle means there are many rooms that are rarely used. And it is in these neglected spaces that the shadows grow deepest. The third floor was traditionally the servants' quarters, and the energy there is markedly different from the opulent rooms below. The ghosts here are not the lords and ladies of the manor, but the workers who dwelled in obscurity. Visitors to the third floor often report feeling an overwhelming sadness and exhaustion. It is the residual emotional imprint of a lifetime of servitude. Maids in black uniforms have been seen hurrying down corridors, only to vanish through solid walls. The sound of weeping is a common occurrence, a sorrowful lament that drifts through the heating vents. The ballroom is not only home to the monk, but also to a more festive group of spirits. During events and parties, guests have reported seeing figures in Gilded Age attire dancing among the living crowd. These apparitions are solid enough to be mistaken for actors until they fade away into nothingness. The music of a phantom orchestra has been heard playing waltzes when the room is silent. It seems that for some of the entities, Belcourt is still a place of celebration, a never-ending party where the champagne never runs dry and the music never stops. However, beneath the gaiety lies a sinister undertone. The dancers do not have faces that can be recalled, and their movements are sometimes jerky and unnatural, like marionettes on strings. Alva Vanderbilt Belmont was a suffragette and a woman of immense power, and her spirit is said to still preside over the castle she reshaped. Her presence is most often felt in her former bedroom suite. Women who enter the room often feel a strong sense of scrutiny, as if they are being judged on their posture and attire. Alva was a perfectionist in life, and death has not softened her standards. Some have reported hearing a sharp female voice commanding them to leave or criticizing their behavior. Objects on her vanity table, such as brushes and perfume bottles, are frequently moved. It is a reminder that while Oliver built the house, Alva ruled it. and she has no intention of relinquishing her authority. The exterior of the castle is just as haunted as the interior. The grounds are filled with statues and gargoyles that cast long shadows in the moonlight. Security guards patrolling the perimeter have reported seeing shadow figures darting between the trees. There is a specific statue on the lawn that is rumored to move on its own, changing its pose or position when no one is looking. The locals in Newport avoid walking past the gates at night, telling stories of a black carriage that pulls up to the entrance before vanishing into the fog. The carriage is believed to be a death omen, a spectral hearse, arriving to collect a soul that is finally ready to depart the earthly plane. One of the most chilling encounters involved a tour guide who was closing up the castle for the night. As he walked through the darkened banqueting hall, he saw a group of people sitting at the long dining table. Thinking they were stragglers from a tour, he called out to them. They slowly turned their heads in unison to look at him. Their eyes were hollow black pits, and their skin was the color of gray ash. The guide fled the room in terror and refused to enter the castle alone ever again. This encounter suggests that the spirits are not merely residual recordings, but intelligent entities capable of acknowledging and interacting with the living. They are aware of us, watching us as we watch them. The psychological toll of living in such a place cannot be overstated. The Tinney family loved Belcourt, but they also lived in a constant state of siege. To live, there was to share your home with the unquiet dead. Every creak of a floorboard, every draft of cold air, every shadow in the corner became a source of potential terror. Sleep was often interrupted by strange noises or the sensation of being watched from the foot of the bed. It takes a specific kind of fortitude to endure such an environment. Over time, the fear can turn into a grim acceptance, a normalization of the paranormal, where a ghost in the hallway is just another annoyance, like a leaky faucet. Skeptics often try to dismiss the stories of Belcourt Castle as the product of overactive imaginations or old house noises. They cite settling foundations and wind whistling through the chimneys. But these explanations fail to account for the consistency of the reports over decades. Different people from different backgrounds who have never met or shared stories report seeing the same figures and feeling the same sensations. The monk, the angry entity in the chairs, the screaming armor thieves are not isolated incidents, but recurring characters in a narrative that has been playing out for over a century. The sheer volume of corroborating evidence makes it difficult to dismiss the hauntings as mere fantasy. The restoration efforts at Belcourt have often stirred up increased activity. Renovations are known to trigger hauntings as the spirits object to changes in their environment. When walls were opened up for wiring or plumbing, the workmen would often find their tools missing or broken. Ladders would be knocked over and paint cans overturned. It was acts of petty sabotage committed by invisible hands. The spirits of Belcourt seem to prefer the decay. They are comfortable with the dust and the cobwebs. Any attempt to modernize the castle is met with resistance. The house wants to remain in the Gilded Age, frozen in the amber of memory and time. Among the many artifacts Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont collected were items related to voodoo and other occult practices. It is rumored that he did not just collect these items for their aesthetic value, but that he dabbled in rituals himself. This opens up a terrifying possibility that the hauntings at Belcourt are not just ghosts of the deceased, but something else entirely. Perhaps he opened a door that was never fully closed, inviting in elemental entities or darker forces that have latched onto the property. This would explain the aggressive nature of some of the phenomena, such as the physical attacks and the overwhelming sense of dread that pervades certain rooms. There is a particular mirror in the castle that is covered with a velvet cloth when not in use. It is said that if you look into this mirror by candlelight, you will not see your own reflection, but the face of a demon looking back at you. Several guests who have dared to peek have reported seeing a twisted visage standing just behind their shoulder. Mirrors are often considered portals to the spirit world, and this specific glass seems to connect to a very dark place. The Tinney family learned to respect the mirror and warned everyone to leave the cover in place. It serves as a reminder that some doors should never be opened. The auditory phenomena at Belcourt are as varied as they are frightening. Beyond the footsteps and screams, there are whispers that seem to come from inside the walls. These whispers are often unintelligible sounding, like a buzzing hive of insects, but occasionally a clear word will cut through. Names of the living are sometimes whispered directly into an ear when no one is close by. It is a violation of personal space that leaves the victim shaken. The source of these voices is never found. They seem to emanate from the very stone and mortar of the building itself, as if the house is trying to speak. The relationship between the castle and the weather is another strange aspect of the haunting. During severe thunderstorms, the activity in the house spikes dramatically. It is theorized that the lightning and atmospheric pressure energize the spirits, giving them more power to manifest. During one particularly violent storm, the heavy oak front doors blew open despite being locked and bolted. The wind howled through the entrance hall, extinguishing every candle and light in the vicinity. When the lights were restored, wet footprints were found leading from the door to the staircase, but they faded away before reaching the first landing. As the years go by, the legend of Belcourt Castle only grows. It has been featured in books and television shows, cementing its reputation as one of the most haunted places in America. But for those who have experienced the house firsthand, it is not a story for entertainment. It is a terrifying reality. The fear it inspires is primal a reaction to the unknown and the unnatural. The castle stands as a monument to the Gilded Age, but it is also a mausoleum. It houses the memories and the souls of those who lived and died within its walls. And they are not resting in peace. The transition of ownership in recent years has brought new life to the castle, but the old spirits remain. The current restoration aims to honor the history of the house, but the ghosts are the ultimate curators. They decide who is welcome and who is not. There is a sense that the house is merely tolerating the current occupants, just as it tolerated the ones before. The humans are transient guests, passing through a timeline that belongs to the dead. The spirits have nowhere else to go, and they have all of eternity to wait. One cannot help but wonder what keeps these spirits tethered to Belcourt. Is it unfinished business, or a tragic death, or simply an attachment to the material possessions they hoarded in life? Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont loved his things, and perhaps his love was strong enough to survive death. Alva Vanderbilt loved her power, and perhaps she refuses to give it up. The servants, perhaps, are trapped by duty or trauma. Whatever the reason, they are bound to the marble and the stone prisoners of their own, making in a gilded cage that has become a gilded hell. The experience of visiting Belcourt is designed to be educational, but the education is often of a spiritual nature. Tours often end with guests looking over their shoulders, checking the dark corners for things that should not be there. Many leave with stories they are afraid to tell for fear of being ridiculed, but the shared look of unease among the group is validation enough. They have felt the cold spots, they have heard the whispers, and they know that the stories are true. The castle leaves a mark on you, a spiritual residue that is hard to wash away. In the end, Belcourt Castle stands as a testament to the endurance of the past. It is a place where the veil between the worlds is thin and frayed. The fog that rolls in from the ocean seems to carry the souls of the drowned and the lost, and they find harbor in the dark halls of the estate. It is a masterpiece of architecture and a masterpiece of horror, intertwined so closely that they cannot be separated. The beauty draws you in, but the darkness keeps you there. The spirits of the Gilded Age are not just memories, they are active participants in the present. As you leave the grounds and the iron gates close behind you, there is a palpable sense of relief. The heavy atmosphere lifts and the air feels lighter. But as you drive away and look back in the rearview mirror, you might see a figure standing in an upper window watching you go, a dark silhouette against the dim light of a chandelier. The monk or the lady or the master himself bidding you farewell. You are leaving, but they remain. In the silence of the night, Belcourt Castle breathes and waits for the next visitor to brave its haunted marble halls.